Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm joined today by what might deem as the medium of the boxing world. I'm joined by Hayden Jones from SA Boxing Talk. Welcome to the show, brother. We've been trying to put this on for a while, so finally we've got it right. And how's things going, man?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Everything's really, really good. Happy to be on this platform.
Yeah, fantastic, man. It's one of those things where it seems like our fighters are crossing boundaries, so why not have the media guys crossing boundaries? I think there's a lot for us to talk about as boxing, is being home to a couple of MMA fighters, maybe a couple of MMA fighters or boxing guys that have crossed over. I think of guys like Elvis Moyo. It seems to me that South African boxing is slowly back on the rise, if we can say that, like with the Fox Sports, the rival of Fox Sports, and guys like yourself really putting in the long hours for getting that exposure back into the sport. So just tell us what's happening a little bit in boxing, man. Obviously, for guys that are paying a little bit of attention, you can see, I mean, luckily, if you follow you guys SA Boxing Talk, we get to see, what's happening at the weigh-ins. People are coming through. There's lots of young up and coming fighters, and boxing is definitely still happening. And a lot of people like to say boxing is dead, but it's definitely still happening.
Well, the current thing is that boxing is back, but it's still growing. Got a couple of youngsters that are putting us on the map again. Got a few world champions from South Africa, which is actually crazy considering that they don't actually still, in today's day and age, get the exposure that they probably deserve. And locally, you have Golden Gloves promotions. They got a whole host of champions. But in terms of legitimate world champions, you just had Hickey Butler. He lost his last championship. Currently you have two in South Africa, which are the big world champions, obviously WBA, WBC, WBO, and IBF.
Yeah, just the Big Ten.
Yeah, the IBO is still... Okay, so the IBO is number 5, but we don't really consider it to be top level. But then, you got guys like Solani Tete and Mauritius Mtsalane who are holding the flag up. So boxing is not really in a bad place if you consider the world champions that we have.
Okay, fantastic, man. What do you think has been the challenges for boxing? Sometimes, like, if I can put an analogy for combat sports, like MMA came onto the storm as kind of like a fast-paced, more like hard-hitting kind of sport. But I think obviously in combat sports we get a couple of different fans. We get the blood and snot fans who just want to see KOs, and you get the purists who want to see the art and the skill and combinations of things. And I think for most people, most combat sports fans, and a lot of South Africans grew up with this love for boxing. I mean, it's deeply entrenched into our sports culture. But sometimes, like when you're trying to get mainstream people into boxing, for example, like often, I'm trying to think of recent cases where you had this massive hype. Let's say Pacquiao Mayweather, for example. You had all this hype, this biggest fight that happened in our lifetime, and for a lot of people, they kind of looked at it and was like, geez, what's going on in boxing? There's a lot of guys, like, I was glued to the seat because realistically, by the 10th round, whoever took the last two could have had an argument for who won that fight. But a lot of your casual fans were like, I could have fallen asleep, I could have just got my coffee. Do you think that in the lower levels of boxing at the moment, where there's not massive amounts of grassroots training anymore like there was a few years ago, do you think that's affecting like boxing viewership and the actual growth of boxing?
I think purely at the moment it's got to do with incentive. I don't think boxers are, and MMA fighters, any fighters are really given that incentive to take up a sport like boxing. I think at the grassroots it's really, really difficult because you're having to work a job and having to do it as a professional sport. Whereas other sports you go in full time, they're paying you on a contract. Boxing is different. If you're lucky, you're getting 4,000 Rand for your first fight. Does that cover your medical bills? No. So you have to go for a very long time, and only if you really are the best do you actually make money in the sport. So it gets to a point where you get to about 10 or 15 fights and you really start to question whether you actually want to do the sport or not. So the incentive is really, really low at the grass level. Whereas if you're a young kid and you got about 10 different sports you can pick from in South Africa, boxing and in boxing you can get your face smashed in one, and you're going to make next to nothing in the beginning. is that a sport you're going to choose, or you're going to go choose to play rugby, cricket, whatever, soccer,
Sure.
those sort of sports. So I think at the grassroots level, it's just about getting the amateur system up and going again. Amateur system, I did an interview with a guy, Willem Nieuwe. He's saying that
the heavyweight.
Yeah, he's saying that there only was a couple of heavyweights in the amateurs. So even if you pitched up for a second fight as an amateur, you're already in the South African Championships. That's a problem.
Yeah, sure. And it's the thing with amateur sports is I think I think amateur MMA in this country is doing okay. It's obviously got a couple of problems. But it's one of those things where I think the sports themselves are relying on a couple of good-hearted, passionate people to really drive the amateur scene. There's not much support, like some of the guys are doing well and getting good sponsors on board and running proper shows, but besides that there's no real support for them, which is really, really difficult. It's like club sports is also even kind of like fizzled out because the guys who couldn't really keep their members paying and collecting fees and donating money and that sort of stuff all kind of faded away. And I think amateur combat sports in this country is facing a lot of problems because that's what it is. It's literally just relying on a couple of guys who are incredibly passionate about the sport to carry it through, which is not always the best thing because it's not an easy thing to do. You know what I mean? These guys have also got jobs and families and stuff like that, and I don't feel bad. I don't think it's just boxing that's struggling with that sort of thing, man. It's a well-versed story through combat sport. What do you think? Obviously, you're one of the big guys in boxing media in the country. What do you think about the transitions from MMA to boxing? Obviously, Conor McGregor was the big one, and I mean, geez, I was so glad when that fight was over because we could stop talking about it and stop hearing about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously we're seeing a bit of that in South Africa now, but it's not like ones and twos and it's not one-hit wonders. Guys are actually like changing career paths, and just give us your thoughts on all of that.
So I mean, locally you had Wade Groth, you had Boyd Allen and Elvis Moyo.
Yeah.
Elvis Moyo was a boxer before he became an MMA fighter. But let's talk about the immediate two. You've got Wade Groth and Boyd Allen. Boyd Allen's still undefeated after 2 fights. Wade Groth became the SA middleweight champion. So if you look at the guys coming over from MMA to boxing, they've done relatively well. They've both been with Golden Gloves promotions, so they've both been built up as championship material. If you look at those two, they haven't done too badly. In fact, I think Boyd Allen actually has an advantage being an MMA fighter first because he's learned how to switch so easily.
Yeah.
Whereas in boxing, you taught very traditionally how to box, and he's very like he had a boxing background as well, of course. So he's a very gifted guy. But coming from MMA, I think it did give him a bit of advantage. He's got combat experience. Whereas if he's fighting someone that comes in with no fights as well, I think that he's got a longer history with that. Not like Conor McGregor, who fought a 49 at the time veteran.
Yeah. Sure. So I guess you would say like Boyd's been under the lights. He's been in title fights. He's fought international fighters, so he's got that on his side. But it seems to be that a lot of the boxing public are not too keen on that. I remember I was watching, I think it was Wade Groth's last fight, and Brian Mitchell it didn't seem that he was too happy to have, as he was calling these cage fighters in his ring.
Yeah.
Is that the general consensus with the boxing public, or is it just the old school mentality maybe?
It could be the old school, it could be the purists, but I think all in all it makes for a good sport. It makes for a talking point if a so-called cage fighter does so well in the boxing ring. What do you call him once he becomes a champion?
Yeah, the cage boxer.
Cage boxer.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to watch, man, and it's why do you think? Because we look at the sports, and I know even locally, okay, some guys are doing really well, but often the underwriting for MMA fighters locally is they want to get paid more. Obviously, what these guys are doing, if you spend a bit of time with any of these guys, I mean, you see what their camps are like, what they're doing, what they're eating, how they're training. It's a process, man, and then to go in and fight hand to hand with another human being who's trying to inflict damage on you, it's a serious sport, man. Combat sports is no joke, and these guys obviously want to get paid. They want to make it worth their while. So, do you think there's more money or more incentive in boxing for guys to cross over from MMA?
I definitely think there's more money in boxing than there is in MMA. I mean, if you look at worldwide, if you look at the pay-per-views on MMA and you look at them in boxing, and you look at how much money Mayweather's making as opposed to how much McGregor was making, you definitely know that there is more money in boxing. At the grassroots, I don't know how much the MMA guys are making at the bottom, but I know that the boxing guys aren't making. But the incentive is if you do get to the top of the pile, you can make a whole bunch of more money in boxing.
Okay, so let's take for example, like in my mind at the moment, the most iconic boxing star I can think of is let's say Kevin Lerena. I think because where he's at in his career, he seems to be one of those guys who's getting better and better and better. I've been watching him for some time, and he seems to be growing really well. So would you say he's the kind of a guy who's really laying down the foundation as in terms of incentive to say, look, if you get to this point, you're going to make good money?
I think he's the best example of a boxer, South African boxer based in South Africa. I think you've got other guys outside the country. Two I'll mention is Chris van Heerden. He's done an amazing job with his social media, and two is DJ Creel, who's recently gone over to America and made a name for himself as well on social media. So if you're looking at how to market yourself, look at those three guys.
Yeah.
They've sort of made it in terms of sponsors, and just basically their pay will be much higher than the rest of the guys.
Do you think for boxing in South Africa to really make it in the big time, you have to go overseas?
No, not necessarily. I think that you can always train from here and then make the trips overseas. I think that a lot of people get this misconception because their managers aren't doing a good enough job and they can't get the connections that they necessarily need to get. I think that going overseas, of course, gets you that exposure, but not necessarily the opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. And it seemed, I remember speaking to a very well-known boxing trainer who knew Chris van Heerden quite well, and at the time he said to Chris, he's like, look, there's nothing really left for you here. The next step of your evolution is to go overseas and try to pursue a bigger career. And I mean, like, obviously Chris has been inactive for a little while, but it seems he's getting things done. He's under some big management there overseas in the States, and if you listen to podcasts with like the fighter and the kid, they often talk about him. So he's in a good mix there. I mean, he's always with guys like Frank Grillo, so he's really in the mix, But we wait to see what happens with Chris, man. And I think he was one of those guys who took the jump, you know what I mean? And I guess in his mind he'll say it was really successful, but it's probably been pretty frustrating as well. We know he came back here, took a fight. So it's quite a strange one. But is Golden Gloves building a bridge for guys to go overseas, or are they kind of just focused on keeping the guys here in the promotion locally, not to really expand?
I think it's two things. They know which boxers aren't going to make it internationally, and they know which ones are.
Okay.
The ones that you do see that have links to America, they probably have a lot of faith in. The other guys, they need to sell the venues at locally here in the casinos.
Sure.
So you'll take a big note that the guys that keep winning but will stay here will be the ones that they know that can sell tickets, and the other guys that are always getting linked to going to fight overseas are the guys that are genuinely have a chance of being a legitimate world champion.
Okay, so we mentioned DJ Creel, Kevin Lerena, Chris van Heerden. Are there some other guys in the lurks that if MMA fans switch over to Supersport, are the guys we should be watching out for?
Definitely. You should never ever forget about Hickey Butler.
Yeah, sure.
That's the little pocket rocket. He's paved waves, the way for guys like DJ Creel with sparring. Guys like Simpiwe Konko has also been sparring there, and then of course this next up and coming sensation Azinga Fuzile. I think if you blink, he's gonna put on a show every time. You might miss it.
Okay, cool.
And Tulani and Mbenge. Let me not forget Tulani.
Yeah. Tulani is another one, man. He's as another guy I've been like staying in and out of touch with. If he's on the card, I'm always checking to see what he did. He seems to be a really, really good prospect, and that will probably be making some waves around the world, which is really exciting.
He's been linked to America as well, so that's what I was getting to.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, man, he's a really talented guy, and he's just seems to be getting better and better and better as well. Like I think I started from when he was about 1-0 maybe, and he's really flourishing, and that's a big camp. That's another similarity we can cross between MMA and boxing. You've got a couple of mega camps in boxing where they just seem to produce guys all the time, like the Smiths, obviously Colin Nathan, who's reasonably just down the road. We have like Apex and CRT. Do you think there's room for more of these mega clubs, and maybe there's the next generation of coaches, even say guys like perhaps Chris van Heerden or Hickey Butler as their careers wind down, to open up their own sort of gyms? Or do you think we're going to start seeing things like that?
I think so. After boxing, what do the guys do? Hickey Butler, I think he's already starting to train people in his part time and so forth. Don't sleep on the Durant's gym. Got a very good young trainer in Damien Durant.
Yeah, sure.
Also, another rival gym coming up in the years. I think that he's got a consistent stable at the moment. Still building. Hasn't got international champions yet, but the guys are relatively young. Falling in his father's footsteps, of course.
Sure.
And you could see even Chris, because he trains clients and so forth.
Yeah.
He could do that in the US, but possibly in the States.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to see. It's always interesting to see where the next generation is going to come from, and we do say the next generation fighter, but there has to be next generation coaches as well, and facilities and gyms and all of these things have to carry on evolving. So it's interesting to see. I know we're looking now at a generation, and there might be a bit of a gap in MMA as to who's going to be the next leaders. If we can put it like that. So it's interesting to see how that pans out across the sport. Obviously, the Smiths is a mega system that and it seems to be as well. Like the better they get, the more guys are flocking there. And any guy who's a sort of prospect maybe sticks at a gym and he can't really. He's like, okay, well, look, my career's not going too far, and it just seems the natural course is to end up in the Smiths. Do you think that? I don't know. It's like a weird thing. Do you think that that these mega sort of structures start to hold back weight classes? For example, like so just close out. Like Coach Pond University or Apex at the moment, like they've got guys clustered in weight classes, but their whole motto is to if you here, your goal is to be overseas. So if there's a guy in front of you in your team, his plan is to become a champion here and then move off overseas, and that's how the system keeps on flowing. Do you have that in boxing where you've got maybe teammates that are backlogging each other?
You definitely get that in the bigger gyms, as you said, Hot Box Gym, the Smiths. You get guys that become chief sparring partners for certain guys, and if they are in the weight divisions, they definitely prove to be better camps because they get to spar the better guys. And when you get into the ring, they fight easy. But also when you look at boxing, you look at different promoters, the guys don't necessarily have to be fighting on the same bills. They can fight other things. As you said, there's so many world titles out there. You can fight for different world titles. So I don't think it necessarily weakens it. I think it actually strengthens the team to be able to have the best fighting the best. So you have the fights in the gym, and then you have it easy out there. And I think it's the same in MMA. You've got guys like Brave that have just come on board as well. So you don't necessarily have to fight an EFC. You can fight at Brave. You can fight at one championship. Well, eventually, if you're good enough, you can fight at Bellator and UFC. But yeah, basically the same sort of thing. Yeah,
100%. Look, we've definitely got a crop of guys that are on the brink of making that gap into the UFC. I think obviously we had the guys before, Ruan Parts and Gareth McClellan and Zulu Boy at Ultimate Fighter and JP Bays at the Contender Series now with Don Madge. And Don Madge is almost like the flag bearer for the next generation. He's it's a lot of pressure for South Africans, especially in MMA, going overseas because it hasn't been successful. Sorry, Cat's trying to make an appearance. It hasn't been, the guys haven't had great success. Obviously, Gareth McClellan, Soldier Boy, got a win there, and that was almost like a monkey off the shoulders back, but then nothing from there. You know what I mean? Like he struggled a bit from there, but I mean he was also he will say he was not in the right place and he had other things going on, and we understand. But like Don really had to go arrive and really make a statement, and now all of a sudden everyone knows who South Africa is, which is really cool. And we've got Chris Sabo coming here, which is because of Don. I mean, Don's worked in her camps before, so we're starting to get this like universal traction in MMA, which is quite cool. And there's a crop of youngsters who are really there. They're gonna, in my mind, that they should be in the UFC anytime soon. In the next year or two, maybe rack up 1 or 2 more wins. So that is happening. The transition is happening. But what is it? So obviously our fighters in MMA here in South Africa are pushing to get into, you mentioned Bellator and UFC. What is the ultimate goal for the youngster now? Maybe he's 7 years old watching boxing locally. What is his ultimate goal? Where does he want to end up?
I think if you're looking at a youngster growing up in South Africa, they look at Golden Gloves. They're always on Super Sports, but there are new avenues. Fox is obviously the biggest networking, the biggest sports network in the world. I think the UFC also is on Fox.
Yeah, just left.
Oh, it just left. Well, okay. But they are the biggest in the world, and I think that they're coming into Africa now as well. So for a youngster looking up, you can look at the networks, but obviously Supersport's the first sort of thing that they look at with DSTV. So Golden Gloves promotion would be the one that everyone looks at. But looking overseas, you got Top Rank, you got I think you pronounce it Danz, which DAZN, which is Benny Hearns. DAZN.
Yeah.
He is doing phenomenal things. He's putting a lot of money into the sport. So I think internationally, on the world scale, you're looking at them. But locally, Golden Gloves, I think, still who you look at locally, and then the arrival of Fox Sports Africa in the next few years. I think we're going to be seeing a few bumps there.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen Fox Sports. Obviously, again, it's through yourself. SA Boxing Talk is so awesome for someone like myself I enjoy watching boxing, but you don't always have the time to stay up to date with every single detail, and you guys do such a great job of covering all of that, and you can see what's happening and really go into detail, who the people are, how the weigh-ins went, obviously you guys do post-event and pre-event sort of things, which really helped, and I think it really wasn't happening in boxing before. There was no one really doing that, you know what I mean? So was that your avenue? So okay, well look, you've obviously got a big passion for the sport, and you just decided, well look, no one's really telling the story of what's going on.
Well, that's the thing, is the story sells everything. In the fight, you watch a pre-fight interview between two. It's actually better when you get both sides. So you got the opponents and the opponents, and you get to pick a side from a neutral point of view. If you're not a boxing fan and you're watching those interviews, you automatically say, I like that guy, or I like that person. It gives them a reason to watch. And whereas you've got two random guys in a ring, it doesn't, and it's a boring fight on top of that, so it doesn't really do much for you. If you've got a big story behind it, it's a boring fight, you can still sell it. Sure. AKA Pacquiao Mayweather fight, So, yeah, a lot of people will talk about that fight as the one. But, for example, the story is the big point behind it.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think it's like, even for the fighters themselves, and bless fighters, because sometimes they don't really understand the situation in front of them, they don't get to practice these sort of things enough, but it's such a great opportunity for a fighter to really express themselves and put themselves out there to the media, you know what I mean? And look, I mean, we're not, realistically, we're not doing ESPN numbers, you know what I mean? But it's really an opportunity for these guys to tell their story and say who they are and get a bit of hype behind their fights, you know what I mean, which is massively important, especially in the day and age we live now, where smack talking stories mean so much in combat sports, you know what I mean.
That's why I actually think South African boxers lack, though. They're way too respectful. They don't have that example. There's no example in South Africa. There's not one boxer that goes out there and says his piece. Everyone's just like, I wish you a good fight, and then it's back to normal again.
Yeah, it's definitely dying for a character who's going to come on board and kind of take the bull by the horns and throw a few things around. Even like for me, I thought a guy like Elvis Moyo, because he's not. I mean, Elvis is he's respectful and quite reserved, but he says strong words, you know what I mean, and he'll really go at guys, which is quite cool. So maybe Elvis just needs a little poke on the side, just to get him roughed up. Let's just mention Elvis Moyo. He's got a pretty big fight coming up.
Absolutely.
It's Ruan Visser.
Yeah, the Giant King.
Yeah, he's a hell of a human being. He's a monstrous man.
I believe 2.07 centimeters.
That's 2.07 meters. Yeah, 2.70 centimeters is like a figure.
Oh, cheapest on meters. Yeah, exactly. He's a giant.
Yeah, 100%. So where can people tune in to see that fight?
That'll be on Kwezi Sports.
Okay.
So I'm not sure which decoder it is, but you can stream it online.
And I think Kwezi, sometimes you can catch it on YouTube as well. They do stream on YouTube from time to time. They were doing that with the EFC, but that kind of fell away. But I do believe that it is there. But otherwise the decoder. Otherwise, SA Boxing Talk will let you know what's happening.
You'll see post-fight interviews from the show. You'll see the weigh-in from that particular event.
Cool, 100%, man. I think that's it really. That's most of the question I want to know, just so people know that you exist and we kind of exist, and we're out here trying to just get the story across and told, and the sports that we love, like to all the boxing people that are hating on the MMA fighters, just calm down, it's going to be okay, and vice versa, everyone just calm down, like there's enough to go around for everybody. Like it's one of those funny things. I love the transition of guys crossing over and trying different avenues. I think it's great, and I think that's what martial arts is really about. Obviously, boxing is a little different because it's such a pure sport, and the sweet science, as everyone says. But it's great to see, man, and it's great to see this like symbiotic relationship that's happening. Maybe we're going to start to get to see a few more boxers trying to follow up in Elvis Moya's footsteps and transition into MMA. But yeah, man, it's great. It's great to hear what's happening. It's great to see boxing back in the game, if we can put it like that. You know, Fox Sports and all of these guys are really trying to change the game a little bit. It's great to see, and guys like yourself, man. So hats off to you, man. You guys do a great job, and it's SA Boxing Talk, and just tell us where everyone can find you, man.
So everyone can find us on Twitter at SA Boxing Talk. You can find us on Instagram at SA Boxing Talk. You can find us at Facebook at SA Boxing Talk. So we don't have any funny names, just SA Boxing Talk.
Simple.
We're based in London, we're based in Cape Town, we're based in Johannesburg and Pretoria, of course. Gauteng, we cover the whole thing. So yeah, our London guys, we're going to be covering Luther Clay and Laduma Lamati, who's fighting in March. Yeah, so we're focusing on the South African guys in England. Sorry, that's in Manchester and Bracknell. And of course in Cape Town we cover most of the Quizzy events. The Color Coded Promotions usually does their thing down there. Not much promotion in Cape Town, unfortunately, which is a big one because we'd like to go on holiday sometime. And of course Johannesburg and Pretoria is probably the bigger ones. Sure. Johannesburg in particular. And you got myself, and you got the writer Cohen, and of course our brand ambassador Ricky Shabalala, who's undefeated middleweight. He's with us as well here in Gauteng. Got Roy's in the UK. He's doing a good job there. And a deep who's drafting in Cape Town, so when I want to come on holiday I can always join up there.
Okay, fantastic, man. And also YouTube. I don't think you mentioned YouTube.
Oh, that's the biggest
massively
platform.
Important.
That's the it's almost a foregone conclusion for me, because that's the platform that we actually saw. I've almost forgot about that. Of course, subscribe to us on YouTube. It's our biggest platform, and of course where you can catch all the interviews, all the fight build-ups, and yeah, particularly after the fights. If you want to see what the fighter is going through and what he's feeling, check that out.
100%, man. Check that out. SA Boxing Talk. Thanks very much for your time, brother, and then I'm sure we'll chat to you again soon. As soon as there's a bit of action happening in our respective worlds, we'll catch up again and see what's happening. And thanks very much for your time, and thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thank you very much for having me on the Big Al Podcast.
Only a pleasure, man. Anytime. Thank you. We're up. Ciao.